San Francisco's housing crisis has been going on since the 90s. Based on the San Francisco Bay Area real estate market cycle figures shown, housing prices have increased by 223.7% from 1990 to 2017. For those who don't know what San Francisco is a city known for its attractions, such as the large Golden Gate Bridge. San Francisco has had a long history of expensive housing costs. It first started when the city created its first zoning law called the Cubic Air Ordinance Act back in the 1870s, was to segregate people and income levels, which was repealed in 1886. Then, once the big tech companies started to develop in Silicon Valley, it created a plethora of new jobs in San Francisco, and there were not enough housing units to support the number of job opportunities that were available in San Francisco. In this video, we will first investigate the way the cost of housing in San Francisco has affected Helen Burns and Liberty Hennigan. Then addressing how Apple and Google are trying to help San Francisco housing become more affordable. Moving on, having these rapid increases in housing prices makes it more tempting to evict tenants under the Ellis Act to make a profit. For those who don't know, the Ellis Act is a California state law that allows landlords to get out of the renting business and evict their tenants. Most of the time, it has been used by landlords that want to evict, sell their property, and make a profit. Based on San Francisco's annual eviction reports, in the past 5 years, 350 households have been evicted due to the Ellis Act. By having housing costs continue to rapidly increase, we continue to put tenants at risk of eviction. Furthermore, on the topic of eviction, Helen Burns, a 94-year-old woman who fought eviction from the apartment that she has lived in for 80 years. It is the same apartment where her sister and father passed away, and she wants to live in it for the rest of her life as well. Then, when the apartment building that Helen Burns has lived in almost her entire life was up for sale, a real estate investor swooped in and bought the building. This real estate investor's goal, like all investors, was to make money on their investments. This investor's game plan was to evict all the tenants and either raise the rent for new tenants or sell the building. But the tenants of the building fought back against eviction, and the real estate investor had a change of heart and allowed Helen Burns and all of the other tenants to stay long term. Moving on, an increase in housing prices can cause more low-income households to live in their cars or shelters because the cost of rent is too expensive. Based on the data from California's Department of Education, an average of 2,236 kids that attend school are undomiciled, which has averaged 4% compared to California's average of 3.1% in the last 5 years. The increase in housing prices affects low-income families, resulting in them sleeping in shelters or cars. Liberty Hennigan is a parent of 6 children that cannot find stable housing. The cost of rent is too high for them to afford, so they live in a car for a while. And when she tried to apply for something that she could afford, like a 2-bedroom apartment or a studio, she was turned away because of how many members were a part of her family. She then tried to look for shelters, but was also turned away by them because of her large family. Then, finally, she was able to find shelter at Hamilton Shelters that gives private rooms to families. Now, her kids don't miss school as much, and they get to do things like sports instead of before when they were living in their car. She states that there's so many people like me in my position. There are so many people that got kids and they're scared to go to the shelter or don't want to put in the necessary footwork to beat down these doors to say, just help me, please. And that being in the private room shelter has made things better for my children. They play sports, they're able to go on field trips, they're not missing so much school because we have a stable foundation. Who is helping solve this problem? Currently, Google is spending $1 billion to make 20,000 houses for a variety of incomes. They announced their housing project back in June 2019. Now, 12,900 units have been built on Google's land. 4,800 houses from loans are in development, and $40 million have been donated to nonprofits in the Bay Area. Also, Apple back in 2019 announced that they will use $2.5 billion to give back to California, putting $1 billion in an affordable housing investment fund, another $1 billion in a first-time mortgage assistance fund, $3 million of Apple-owned and available land for housing, $150 million in the Bay Area Housing Fund, and finally $50 million to support vulnerable populations. How can you help? Spreading awareness is one of the major ways to help. The best part is it's free. You have the entire world in the palm of your hand, so why not put it to use? You can share posts related to San Francisco's housing crisis to your story, or even a simple action like liking this video. In conclusion, we talked about eviction and how it is affected by the increase in rent prices. We also talked about how tech companies have seen how they affect the housing market and how they're trying to help solve it. We discussed Helen Burns, who has lived and continues to live in the same apartment for over 80 years. We talked about how the rapid increase in housing costs have caused low-income families to have to live in their car and shelters. We also discussed how Liberty Hennigan, a mom of 6, can provide shelter for all her children and the hardships that rent prices can cause.